The desert night was cold and the stars burned like silver fire across the sky. Yet inside the ruins, everything was darker and older than time itself, and he felt it breathing against his skin like a memory that did not belong to him. He was called Daniel, and he was not a soldier or a scholar. He was a scavenger who walked between broken cities and silent battlefields looking for anything that could be carried and sold for credits. And when he stepped into the black chamber that night, he thought he had found nothing more than another worthless pile of stone and dust. The chamber was wide and empty, with tall walls carved with alien symbols that glowed faintly, as if holding a light too weak to escape, and in the center stood a single object like a throne or an altar, yet not a throne, and not an altar either, something that looked both sacred and mechanical, its surface covered in scars from age and war. Daniel laughed when he saw it, and his voice echoed through the hollow chamber, a voice too loud for a place that had not heard laughter in 1,000 years, and he muttered to himself like he often did when alone in strange places. He said, "What kind of people build something like this and leave it to rot here in the dust?" His hand brushed against the relic, and the metal was colder than ice, colder than stone, and yet it felt alive, like it had a pulse, like it was waiting, and he drew his hand back quickly and shook his head and laughed again. He said, "This thing looks broken. Maybe it used to be a machine. Maybe it was once powerful, but now it is just dead like the people who made it." The silence was heavy, and the stars outside seemed to lean closer, as if listening to his words. And still Daniel was not afraid. He never feared ruins. He feared the living, not the dead. So he leaned down, and with a crooked smile, he whispered, as if speaking to an old toy, "Wake up." The words were meant as a joke, just a careless whisper meant to break the silence. But the relic did not treat them as a joke. For the first time in his life, Daniel heard a sound that did not belong in this world, a deep voice like thunder, yet sharp like a blade, echoing from nowhere and everywhere all at once. And the relic answered. "Fleet status, awaiting orders." Daniel froze, his breath caught in his throat, his heart hammering against his chest. He stumbled back, his lamp shaking in his hand, casting wild shadows against the walls. The alien symbols flared brighter than fire, and the whole chamber pulsed with light like a heartbeat awakening. He tried to laugh again, but the sound died in his throat, because the relic was no longer silent. The machine that had looked dead was alive, and its voice carried the weight of countless years, countless wars, countless deaths, and it was listening to him. Daniel whispered, "No, this cannot be real. This is just broken tech, just a dead box repeating some old recording." But the relic replied again, with the same calm power, as if speaking to a commander of fleet's. Voice recognition confirmed awaiting command authority. His legs trembled, but some part of him, the reckless part, that always pushed him into danger, did not run. He stepped closer with his hand shaking and said, "You are a machine, you are dead, you are nothing." And still his voice was weak like a child before thunder. The chamber shook, dust falling from the high ceiling, and the relic shifted its surface, opening like petals of steel, and light spilling out like rivers across the floor. Alien screens rising from nothing, symbols dancing faster than his eyes could follow, maps and lines, and strange movements, as if a great mind had awakened and was now stretching after a long sleep. Daniel felt the air heavy pressing down on him, his chest tight, his skin prickling, and yet he could not look away, because in those glowing maps he saw something he understood. He saw stars and fleets drawn in fire and shadow moving across endless space, and he realized this relic was not a throne, not an altar. It was a command core of something vast. He whispered again, "No one is left. Your people are gone. Your empire is dust. There is no one to command." And still the machine waited in silence, patient, like a hunter waiting for the prey to breathe. The symbols shifted again, and the relic spoke new words in a tone that froze the blood in his veins. Authority unverified, awaiting override, human presence, detected possible proxy, authority assigned, command wire in. Daniel could not move his mind, screamed, "Run, run, now, leave this cursed place." Yet his body betrayed him. He was drawn forward, as if the relic pulled at his soul, and he felt the air hum against his skin as the relic measured him, weighed him, judged him. His lamp flickered and died, and only the alien light filled the chamber, the ruins alive with whispers like the voices of ghosts calling his name, calling him commander. For the first time in many years, Daniel felt fear, real fear, not of hunger or war or men with guns, but fear of something older and greater, something that had watched the stars burn for millennia, something now awake, because of a careless joke. His voice was small, yet it carried across the vast chamber. He said, "I am not your commander. I am no one. I do not give orders. I do not lead fleets." And still the relic pulsed with light, as if ignoring his protest, as if it had already made its choice. Outside in the desert, the ground trembled faint at first, then stronger stones sliding down the slopes of dunes, as if the earth itself had been disturbed, something stirring far beneath the sand. And Daniel knew with a terrible clarity that he had done something he could never undo. His breath quickened, his chest heavy, his mind racing. He thought of running, yet he knew there was nowhere to run, for whatever had awakened was not bound to this chamber or to this world. It was bound to him and his words and the command he had not yet given. The relic spoke again, the voice calm, the voice endless, fleet status, hidden fleet concealed, awaiting final order. And Daniel whispered into the firelit chamber, his voice shaking, "What have I done?" The desert winds carried whispers over the ruins, and though Daniel stood deep within the alien chamber, he could feel the sand shifting above, as if the world outside sensed the pulse of what had been stirred from its long slumber, and the silence that followed the relic's words was more dreadful than any storm, because silence meant waiting, and waiting meant choice. Daniel's hands trembled as he held his breath, the glow of the relic burning brighter around him, and in the reflection of its polished surface, he saw his own face pale, wide-eyed, a scavenger who had spent his life mocking broken things, and now stood before something that refused to stay broken, something that refused to die. He whispered again, though his voice cracked like brittle glass, "You are not meant for me. You belong to ghosts." And yet the relic listened, as if each word was carved into its circuits, as if each word weighed more than 1,000 years of silence. The walls of the chamber shifted, faint cracks spreading outward, and Daniel realized with growing dread that the machine was not confined to this single room, for beneath the desert floor great hidden structures moved, ancient systems, awakening after centuries of sleep, and with each shift of the earth dust rained from the ceiling, and the ground trembled as if vast roots were stretching upward to taste air again. He wanted to run, yet the doorway behind him was filled with light, searing too bright to cross, and in that light, he thought he saw shadows like figures of soldiers, standing watch, their outlines sharp and tall, though when he blinked they were gone, leaving only the echo of marching feet within his mind. His heart pounded in his ears like a drum of war, but he could not force his legs to move, because the relic spoke again, its voice deeper than thunder, hidden fleet integrity, confirmed vessels, in deep concealment systems, operational awaiting command. Daniel fell to his knees, not from worship, but from the weight of it all, because those words were no longer a riddle, no longer the broken loop of an old recording. They were truth, and the truth was too vast for his mind to hold fleets, not one, not two, but fleets waiting, hidden for ages, waiting for an order, waiting for him. He pressed his palms against the cold floor, the alien patterns glowing beneath his skin, as if the chamber itself read him, as if the chamber breathed with him, and he remembered every tale, every warning about ruins that were cursed, devices that should never be touched, stories told by fires under the night sky that he once laughed at, and now they wrapped around him like chains. The air thickened heavy and sharp, the glow of the relic becoming a storm of symbols swirling across the walls and ceiling, and Daniel saw maps again, galaxies drawn in endless light lines of power, and movement fleets crossing dark space like rivers of fire, each ship no more than a spark. Yet he knew each spark carried weapons greater than anything mankind had ever dreamed. His breath came ragged, his throat dry, as he whispered to no one, to himself, to the shadows, "You cannot give me this, I cannot carry it. I am just one man, I am nothing." And still the relic glowed brighter, still it waited, still it believed. The chamber rumbled, the desert above breaking apart, as hidden machinery awoke for the first time in ages, dunes collapsing into vast pits, as towers of metal pushed upward, ancient hangars buried beneath oceans of sand, revealing glimpses of colossal shapes, still sleeping ships entombed, yet ready for the call of war. Daniel could feel them in his blood like phantom heartbeats, each ship tied to the relic, each ship tied to him, because he had spoken the words that broke the silence, and with that careless joke he had opened a chain that could never be locked again. His body screamed to run, his instincts clawed for escape, yet his soul ached with something else, something he did not understand, to pull a bond, as if the relic had reached into him and found a thread of command he never knew he carried, and now it wove him into the very fabric of a forgotten fleet. The floor beneath him cracked, and through those cracks he saw a light, rising, not fire, not lava, but raw energy, glowing like liquid stars flowing beneath the world, feeding the hidden machines that had waited like predators in shadow. And he realized this was no ruin, this was a nest, and he had awakened a brood. His voice broke again, louder this time, though it shook with terror. I said it as a joke. I am no commander, you cannot follow me. I give no orders, and yet the relic answered calmly with its voice of iron command, verified human vessel, acceptable, awaiting operational directive. Daniel pressed his hands to his head, his vision swimming the chamber, spinning as if space itself bent around him, and in the spinning he saw again those ghostly shadows, the soldiers, standing tall, faceless, yet loyal, waiting, and in their silence he felt something worse than fear, he felt expectation. The desert winds above howled, the stars burning cold and bright over a world that was no longer quiet, and far beyond the horizon signals pulsed like echoes reaching across systems, beacons, awakening beacons that had slept for ages, now shining like knives through the dark. Daniel staggered to his feet, his legs weak, but his eyes fixed on the relic, glowing like a second sun within the chamber, and though every part of him wanted to deny it, he knew one truth clear as the breath in his lungs: the fleet would not go back to sleep, not now, not ever. The relic spoke again with words that shook the walls and made the desert quake below surface. Fleet awakening time to readiness, minimal, awaiting orders. Daniel stood in the storm of light, his chest rising and falling with ragged breath, his heart caught between terror and something darker, something deeper, the knowledge that he alone had the voice to answer. And as the ground trembled and the stars seemed to listen, he whispered into the blinding light, "What if I never give you orders, what then?" The relic paused, silence heavy as a grave, and then it answered with a voice so calm it froze his blood, "Then we wait forever, Commander." The desert night was no longer still, for the earth shook with a deep rumble, as if 1,000 giants were walking beneath the sand, and Daniel stood at the heart of it, all trembling with fear, as the relic's voice echoed inside his chest like a drum of war, and the air around him throbbed with power that no human hand had felt in living memory. From the cracks in the ground outside, pillars of metal burst upward, scattering sand into the sky like fountains, and each pillar rose higher and higher, unfolding with smooth mechanical grace, until shapes began to form, vast hulls of ships larger than mountains, long forgotten, yet not decayed, their surfaces glowing with alien fire, as they awakened to the call of their master. Daniel stumbled to the doorway of the chamber, the light burning his eyes, yet he forced himself to look, because some part of him refused to turn away from what he had unleashed, and what he saw stole his breath. Across the horizon, dunes collapsed into wide craters, and within those craters lay the bodies of Titan's machines, shaped like war vessels with wings of steel and engines that burned with starfire. The relic spoke again, voice calm as the stillness before battle, hidden fleet emergence at 15% structural integrity, optimal, awaiting coordination, command. And Daniel whispered back, though his voice was nearly lost against the roar of rising sand, "I am no commander, I am nothing." The relic answered, "Fleet does not recognize, nothing. Fleet recognizes authority, and your presence confirms authority." And Daniel's heart twisted with dread, because he realized the fleet did not care who he was, it cared only that he was here, and that he had spoken the words that opened the gate. Above him the sky split with lines of fire, as smaller craft broke free from underground hangars, darting upward like arrows, glowing bright, as they formed into formation, silent, perfect, disciplined like soldiers drilled for war, even though they had slept for centuries, and still they obeyed without hesitation. Daniel's legs felt weak, his body heavy, his thoughts scattered, but he could not stop watching as more and more ships rose the horizon, no longer desert, but a sea of machines, each vessel humming with restrained power, and in that sight he felt the weight of something no human had ever carried before, the weight of a fleet that could burn worlds. The chamber behind him pulsed with brighter light, the alien patterns flowing like rivers of flame across the walls, And the Relic spoke again, fleet awakening at 30%, preparing full activation, awaiting operational directive. And Daniel clenched his fists, his nails biting into his palms, and whispered, "What happens if I give no orders?" The Relic replied, "Then the fleet will hold position, awaiting forever, Commander." And the word forever fell upon him like a mountain, crushing his breath, crushing his soul. Because he knew forever meant more than time. It meant binding, it meant chains, it meant his life would never again be his own. The earth shook harder as another colossal ship broke free, its hull black as night, its edges sharp as blades, engines glowing with a light that painted the dunes red, and Daniel felt tears burn his eyes, because the sight was both beautiful and terrible, a vision of wonder and doom bound together in steel. He turned his face away, his knees striking the sand, his breath ragged, as he tried to remind himself that he was a scavenger, a man of dust and scraps, not a leader, not a commander, not a voice for war. And yet the fleet did not care. The fleet waited, the fleet obeyed. He lifted his head again, and in the light of rising ships, he saw the shadows, once more tall figures, faceless, yet familiar, standing in ranks across the dunes, though they were not real, not flesh, only echoes of those who once served, yet their silence was heavy, and in their silence, he felt their eyes upon him, as if asking, "Will you lead, or will you fall?" Daniel screamed into the night, his voice raw, "I never asked for this, I never wanted this." And the desert carried his words far, but no answer came except the steady hum of engines and the voice of the Relic repeating, "Operational directive pending." The stars above glittered cold and sharp, and for a moment Daniel felt as if the universe itself leaned closer to hear his answer, the cosmos, holding its breath, waiting for a single man in the sand to decide the fate of fire. His chest ached, his hands shook, and still he whispered, "Though only the Relic could hear me, a commander of fleets, me a man whose steel scrap from grays, you are wrong." And still the Relic glowed brighter, unshaken, unwavering authority, confirmed command chain, secured awaiting command. Daniel pressed his forehead against the hot sand, his teeth clenched, his heart pounding like thunder, and he thought of running away into the night, leaving the ships to wait forever. But the thought died quickly, because he knew the fleet was bound not to the desert, not to the Relic, but to him, and wherever he went they would follow. The dunes split again, another vessel rising enormous and dreadful, its engines shaking the air, and Daniel raised his head to watch as the ground cracked wider, whole fields of metal, awakening ships, stacked beneath ships, endless ranks like buried armies returning to life, and the truth pressed heavier upon him. The fleet was not small, the fleet was vast, so vast it could swallow systems. And still the Relic whispered, awakening at 60%, awaiting coordination, awaiting orders, awaiting the voice of command. Daniel stood slowly, his body weak, but his eyes locked on the Relic, his face pale in the glow of fire. And he whispered, "If I do nothing, if I remain silent, will the fleet remain silent too?" And the Relic answered, "Silence will endure as long as you endure, Commander." His heart stilled at those words, for they carried a meaning darker than the void itself. If he lived, the fleet lived. If he died, the fleet died. They were bound, and there was no escape. The desert wind screamed as the last of the great ships tore free from the earth, towering into the night, engines blazing like newborn suns, and Daniel stood beneath them, smaller than dust, yet holding within his throat the single thread of command that tied them all. And as the fleet took its place above the dunes, silent, vast, unstoppable, Daniel whispered into the storm of light, "What if I say go home?" The Relic answered, "There is no home, only orders, Commander." The desert was no longer silent, for the air trembled with the roar of engines, and the ground groaned, as if it could not bear the weight of the Titans that had risen from their long burial. And Daniel stood at the center of it, all his body weak, his voice trapped in his throat, his heart beating against his ribs, as if it sought escape from the weight of destiny. Above him the sky glowed red with the fire of awakening ships, their hulls stretching into the clouds, their engines burning with ancient power, and each vessel hovered in perfect silence, like hunters waiting for a signal, like wolves waiting for the hand of their master to point toward prey. And Daniel could feel their eyes, though they had none, could feel their attention, though they had no minds of flesh, because the fleet was awake, and the fleet was bound to him. The relic within the chamber pulsed brighter than ever, its voice echoing through his skull. Fleet status emergence. Complete 70% operational signals, transmitting awaiting confirmation, awaiting command, and Daniel felt his knees in the sand, clutching his head, as if he could block out the voice, but it was not in the air. It was inside him. It was inside his bones. Far beyond the desert, across the black sea of space, a ripple spread outward faster than light, faster than thought, a signal that carried the weight of an empire long gone, a signal that called across systems and outposts, across listening stations built by alien hands and human hands alike, and the universe heard. On a mining outpost at the edge of a barren moon, a crew of human workers paused as their consoles flared with symbols none could understand, alarms screaming through the halls, and one man whispered with dread that this was not from any beacon. They knew this was not from Earth, nor from any colony. This was older, deeper, and it carried a command not meant for them. On a distant cruiser of a rival alien empire stationed beyond the rim of the galaxy, the officers rose from their seats as their screens filled with fire and lines of code they had only studied in forbidden archives, and the commander, with scales of silver, whispered to his crew that the war relics had awakened, that the ghost fleets were stirring once more. Across the galaxy, in places long forgotten, in ruins deeper than oceans, old watchers opened their eyes. Programs written by the dead responded to the call, and signals pulsed like drums of war, echoing from star to star, and every listener, every power knew that something vast had been awakened, and it was not theirs to command. Back in the desert, Daniel lifted his head, his face pale, his breath shallow, and he whispered, "You have sent a signal. You have told the universe you are alive." And the relic answered calmly, "Confirmation, correct, fleet presence, transmitted to command grid, awaiting external response, awaiting operational directive." And Daniel's stomach twisted with fear, because he knew the universe would come running to claim what had risen. The fleet above shifted its formation, silent, engines humming as hundreds of ships aligned in perfect rows like an army awaiting inspection, and Daniel saw within their glow the shadows of soldiers, tall, faceless, and countless, standing ready across the dunes, their silence heavy, their loyalty absolute. Though they were only echoes, only ghosts of what once was, yet he felt their eyes pressing on him, pressing for a decision. The desert wind screamed, carrying sand like knives, and Daniel shouted into the storm, "I cannot command you. I cannot lead a fleet. I cannot fight a war." And the relic responded, command chain confirmed, awaiting orders, command cannot be denied. His body shook, his teeth clenched as he stumbled backward across the sand, staring up at the endless ships, the titans that floated in silence, their power too vast for his mind to hold. And in his heart, he felt the weight of 1,000 stars pressing down, as if the universe itself had chosen him, though he was only a scavenger, a thief of ruins and scraps. Far above the clouds, beyond the reach of air, smaller ships broke formation and streaked into the void, carrying signals, further still probes, awakening carriers dispatching data across light years, and Daniel felt each one in his bones, as if his blood carried their path, as if his soul had been grafted to the fleet itself, and he realized that distance no longer mattered. Wherever they went, he would feel it, he would know it, he would never be free. The stars overhead burned cold and sharp, and for a moment he thought he saw movement beyond them, as if distant eyes had already turned toward this world, as if the signal had not only been heard but answered, and the thought chilled him more than the desert night, for he knew others would come soon, human or alien, it did not matter, and none of them would let him keep what he had awakened. The relic spoke again, its tone unchanging, its patience endless. External contact probability at 98% estimated arrival window. 4 planetary cycles, awaiting defensive directive, and Daniel staggered at the words, his knees buckling, because the relic was not warning him. It was asking him if he wished to prepare for war. His throat burned, his chest ached as he whispered, "I am not a warrior. I am not a leader. I am not what you want." And yet the fleet above held steady, and the relic's answer was the same: fleet does not want, fleet obeys. The dunes quaked again as another wave of ships rose, vast carriers black as shadow, their surfaces alive with rivers of light. And when Daniel looked upon them, he felt something shift within his heart, not pride, not courage, but a sense of inevitability, because the fleet was awake, and nothing could put it back to sleep. The desert sky cracked with thunder as the last of the great warships tore free from the earth, their engines igniting with fury, and the Relic spoke once more, awakening 99%, full readiness imminent, awaiting orders, Commander. Daniel fell against the sand, his eyes locked on the endless horizon of steel, his breath shaking, his voice barely more than a whisper. What if I give no order? What if I say nothing at all? And the Relic's answer came swift and merciless. Then we wait with you forever, Commander. And Daniel knew, with a terror deeper than death, that silence was no escape, for silence was a chain as heavy as command itself. The desert stretched endless under the pale light of dawn, the horizon glowing faint with the rising sun. Yet above that horizon the sky was filled not with clouds, but with warships ancient and vast, their hulls glimmering like blades of steel, their engines whispering like sleeping beasts, waiting for the command of the one who had awakened them. Daniel stood among the dunes, his body weary, his throat raw, his eyes bloodshot from a night without rest. And still the Relic within the chamber glowed brighter, its voice pressing in his skull, repeating the same words over and over, awaiting command, awaiting directive, awaiting purpose. And each time he heard it, his heart tightened, because he had no answer to give. The wind swept sand against his boots, and in that quiet moment between breaths, Daniel thought perhaps he had time, perhaps the universe would take longer to hear the call, perhaps he could find a way to bury the Relic again, to silence its voice. But the thought died the instant the Relic spoke again, with a tone colder than the void. External contact confirmed, unknown vessels approaching, estimated arrival 2 hours, planetary cycle awaiting. Defensive preparation. Daniel stumbled backward, his chest heavy, his breath sharp, his thoughts broken into fragments. 2 hours. That was nothing. 2 hours until the universe touched the desert. 2 hours until the eyes that had turned toward the signal would open fully, and he would no longer stand alone. Above him, the awakened fleet shifted their formation, hundreds of ships aligning in perfect order, their weapons systems stirring like predators tasting the air. And though they remained silent, Daniel felt the weight of their focus upon him, a weight so heavy it crushed the air from his lungs. Far beyond the clouds, the first of the unknown vessels cut across the dark, its hull marked with human insignia, not alien, and on the bridge of that vessel officers scrambled as their scanners lit with readings too vast to comprehend, entire fleets awakening beneath a single desert world. And the captain, a man of iron jaw and weary eyes, whispered to his crew that this was no drill, this was the echo of a fallen empire, and it had answered. To someone on that world, the ship transmitted signals in every direction, desperate calls for support, warnings to colonies and outposts, messages to command that something impossible had risen, and still it pressed forward, its engines burning as it descended toward the atmosphere, guided by curiosity and fear. Daniel felt the moment of arrival before he saw it, his skin prickling, his blood heavy, his mind echoing with the Relic's voice. Incoming Fleet 1, identified, human design, low threat index, awaiting directive, engage or observe. And Daniel's heart broke, because the Relic saw the ship as nothing more than a line of data, a piece on a board, a tool to be crushed or ignored. He whispered, his voice shaking, "No, do nothing there, my people, do not harm them." And the Relic replied, confirmation, observe only, no engagement, awaiting next directive. And Daniel sank into the sand, trembling, because he realized he had spoken like a commander without meaning to, and the fleet had obeyed. The human vessel pierced the clouds, engines roaring, sandstorms rising in its wake as it descended low above the desert. And Daniel lifted his head, shielding his eyes, as the shadow fell across him, a shadow that did not belong to alien ships, but to his own kind, and the sight struck him harder than any blade, because now it was not only ghosts and relics, it was living men and women coming to face what he had awakened. On the bridge of the vessel, the captain stared wide-eyed at the endless horizon, filled with alien ships, titans larger than anything humanity had ever built, and his crew whispered in terror, their voices tight, their hands trembling over controls as they realized each vessel could end their lives in a breath. Yet none moved, none fired, all waited in silence, as if bound to an unseen master. The captain demanded communication to the surface, and Daniel heard his voice boom through the desert, amplified by speakers rough and desperate. Identify yourself. Who commands this fleet? Who has awoken these relics? and Daniel's knees buckled for the words cut through him like fire, because he was the one the fleet obeyed, and he had no answer he could give. The relic within the chamber spoke again, external signal requesting authority validation response protocol, engaged, awaiting decision commander, and Daniel pressed his hand against his head, his voice breaking. I am no commander. I'm nothing. I never asked for this. And yet the relic pulsed brighter, its patience endless, awaiting his choice. The human vessel hovered above the dunes, guns ready, but silent, and the captain's voice thundered again, answer now, or we will act in defense of our kind. And Daniel lifted his face to the sky, his lips trembling, his eyes wet with tears, and he whispered, I do not control them, I only spoke. And they awoke, I am no master and no leader, I am just a man, and his words carried across the desert, carried into the ship, carried into the hearts of those who listened. Silence followed heavy as stone, and the relic spoke again, external response, delayed, probability of escalation, rising, awaiting defensive directive, awaiting authority, awaiting your voice, commander. And Daniel shook his head, violently screaming into the sky, no, I forbid it, do not harm them. Do nothing at all. And the relic answer directive confirmed no engagement, fleet holds. The captain on the ship stared at his console, his crew, reporting no hostile activity, no aggression, only silence. And in that silence, he felt something more dreadful than war for war. He could understand, but silence from a fleet so vast, it could shatter worlds. That silence meant obedience, that silence meant there was a master, and the thought filled him with fear. He turned to his officers, his voice low. He is on the surface, someone is down there, someone they obey, and we must know who he is and why. And the order was given for a shuttle to descend a small craft carrying men and weapons to land in the desert and bring the one responsible before them. Daniel saw the shuttle break from the vessel, descending swift, cutting through the light of dawn, and he fell against the sand, his chest hollow, his thoughts racing. Because he knew they would find him, they would know, and once they knew, they would not let him go. They would never allow a scavenger to hold the chains of an empire's fleet. The relic spoke again, calm as the tide. Incoming vessel, small scale, human troop, transport probability of contact 100%, awaiting directive, awaiting response, awaiting command. And Daniel whispered, no command, no orders, let them come. The shuttle landed in a storm of dust, its doors sliding open, soldiers stepping onto the sand, their weapons gleaming, their armor bright against the shadow of ancient ships, and Daniel's heart pounded as their eyes found him a lone man, standing small beneath the titans of a forgotten empire. And as the soldiers marched toward him, the relic whispered once more words that felt like chains closing around his soul, commander, contact has begun. The desert wind howled, carrying sand like knives across the dunes as the human shuttle settled into the ground, its engines roaring before cutting into silence. And Daniel stood with knees trembling as the soldiers emerged, their armor gleaming, their visors dark, their rifles raised, though their steps were slow, cautious, as if the very ground beneath them warned of danger. They formed a line in the sand, their boots sinking slightly, their movements sharp and practiced, and at their center walked the officer, a woman tall and steady, her voice echoing through a helmet speaker, calling across the distance, identify yourself, now, who commands this fleet, who awakened these ships? And Daniel felt the words sink into his bones, heavier than the relic's voice, for they were words of the living, words that demanded an answer. The relic inside the chamber pulsed brighter, whispering in his mind, external contact confirmed, awaiting authority validation, awaiting response, commander. And Daniel's lips parted, but no words came. His throat was dry, his chest heavy, his body screaming to deny, to flee, to vanish into the dunes. But the soldiers closed the distance, their weapons steady, and their officer's voice thundered again, speak, or we will treat you as hostile. Daniel staggered backward, his hands raised, his voice cracking, I am no threat. I am no commander. I am just a scavenger. I found the relic, and I made a joke. I said, wake up, and it answered me. And now this. And he spread his arms wide, pointing at the sky, filled with alien warships like blades suspended in silence, and his voice shook with fear and rage. I never asked for this. I never wanted this. The soldiers paused, uncertainty rippling through their formation, for the man before them looked nothing like a warlord, nothing like a general, nothing like the master of fleets. He was thin, worn, covered in dust, and yet above them hung the proof, the impossible fleet waiting without motion, without command, without purpose, until he spoke. The officer's voice cut through the storm, cold and sharp. Scavenger, or not, you have our loyalty. You woke them, you hold authority. Tell us how. And Daniel shook his head, his voice breaking again. I do not know. I only spoke the words, and they listened and they obey, and now they wait, and they will not return to silence. And his hands fell limp at his sides, his eyes wide as he whispered, and they call me commander. The relic within the chamber glowed brighter, its voice pressing into his mind, awaiting directive. External forces detected probability of escalation, rising, awaiting orders, awaiting your will, commander. And Daniel pressed his hand against his ears as if he could block the voice, but it was not outside, it was inside, woven into him, bound to his blood. The officer raised a hand, signaling her soldiers to lower their rifles, though they did not lower them, far their eyes hidden behind dark visors and their hands still tense upon the triggers, and she stepped closer, her boots crunching against the sand, her voice lower, yet sharp. If what you say is true, then you have no idea of the fire, you hold no idea what this means. Humanity has never built ships like these, no empire of ours could dream of such power, and yet they wait for you. Daniel's breath shook, his eyes glancing skyward at the endless rows of warships, their engines silent, their weapons ready, and he whispered, power means nothing to me. I am no ruler, no leader. I'm only one man. And the officer's reply was swift yet heavy, whether you want it or not, power has chosen you. The relic pulsed brighter, the ground trembling, faint cracks spreading through the dunes as more of the hidden structure stirred, and Daniel felt the heat rise against his skin as if the earth itself burned with expectation, and the relic's voice grew louder, awaiting command, awaiting command, awaiting command, and Daniel screamed into the storm, I will give no command. Silence fell, a silence deeper than the wind, deeper than the hum of the engines, a silence that weighed upon the soldiers as they looked at him and then at the sky, and the officer's voice carried again, quiet yet filled with awe and fear. Then why do they wait? They should move, they should act, yet they wait, because you told them to wait. And in that moment she and her soldiers understood the truth. Daniel lowered his head, his shoulders heavy, his voice faint, because they listened to me, and I cannot stop them, I cannot silence them, and I cannot walk away. And his words carried across the desert. And for the first time the soldiers saw the chains not of steel, but of command, chains binding a man who had never wanted them, chains heavier than any prison. The officer looked to her crew, then back to Daniel, her visor hiding her eyes, yet her voice steady, you may not want this, but others will. When word spreads, when empires hear the signal, they will come, they will try to take it from you, they will try to take you, and they will kill anyone who stands in their way. And her words carried the taste of truth, sharp and bitter. Daniel's chest tightened as he whispered, then, I must run. And the relic replied in his mind, command cannot run, command is bound. And Daniel fell to his knees again, clutching the sand, his tears falling as he whispered, I am trapped. The officer stood over him, her voice firm. Then we must decide if we protect you or take you. And her words struck like blades, because he knew she spoke the truth, for no human commander would allow such power to remain in the hands of Scavenger. No leader of any world would allow him to walk free. Above them, the fleet shifted slightly, a ripple moving through the endless rows of ships like a single breath passing through a giant, and the soldiers tensed their rifles, rising once more as fear pressed into their hearts. But the ships did not fire, they only waited, silent, patient, chained to the will of one broken man. Daniel lifted his head, his voice ragged, his throat burning. I give no orders to fight. I give no orders at all. And the relic whispered again, patience, eternal, awaiting forever, commander. And his soul shivered, for forever meant no escape, no end. The officer stared at him in silence, her soldiers shifting uneasily around her. And after a long moment, she spoke with a voice heavy as stone, then the galaxy will come for you, and when it does, you will have to choose. Daniel's body shook, his heart aching, his eyes burning as he looked at her and whispered in despair, I cannot choose, I cannot. And yet above the desert, the fleet waited silent, vast, endless, and patient, as if it already knew the choice would come whether he wished it or not. The night sky burned with light as alien signals cracked through the darkness, their voices echoing across space, announcing their arrival. One by one, fleets of shapes unknown to human eyes unfolded from the void, their hulls jagged, their weapons glowing, their engines humming with colors no human ship had ever shown. And Daniel stood beneath that sky, his knees heavy, his breath shaking his heart pounding with the weight of countless worlds watching. The human soldiers drew tighter around their officer, their rifles raised, their stances rigid, but Daniel could feel the fear beneath their armor. He could feel it ripple like a second wind, because they knew they were ants before giants, and only the fleet above Daniel stood between them and endless fire. The relic pulsed bright within the chamber, its voice rising stronger than before. Commander, external fleets detected thousands of vessels, identified probability of conflict, overwhelming, awaiting directive, awaiting command, and Daniel pressed his hand against his skull, his voice breaking. I will give no command. I will not unleash this war. I will not. The officer stepped forward, her voice sharp, yet trembling. You cannot hold silence forever. They will not wait. They will not retreat. They will demand. And when you deny, they will burn us all. And Daniel raised his head, eyes red, his voice cracked. Then let them burn me. Let them burn the ground. Let them burn my name. But I will not speak death. Above him, the alien fleet expanded, vast, endless, filling the night. Like storms of fire, their signals clashing against each other, as if beasts circling for prey. And suddenly a voice, unlike the relic, unlike the humans, cut across the sky. A voice, deep, metallic, heavy, with age. Scavenger, human speaker, command, surrender the fleet, or be consumed, surrender, or vanish into dust. The words shook the air. Soldiers staggered, sand shifting across the dunes. Daniel's lips trembled as he whispered, I am no ruler, I am no general, I am only Daniel, I am only a scavenger. And yet the alien voice thundered again, you are commander, your words bind steel, your silence binds fire, your breath holds life. You cannot escape, you cannot deny. The relic's voice rose louder, its light blazing across the chamber, awaiting directive, awaiting choice, awaiting forever. And Daniel felt his knees, hands sinking into sand, his tears cutting trails across dust, his heart begging for escape, his soul begging for peace. The officer knelt beside him, her visor shadowing her face, her voice steady, yet heavy. Daniel, if you choose silence, then billions may die. If you choose war, then billions may die. But if you do nothing, then they will take you and twist you and use you, and the galaxy will suffer. Still, you must act, you must choose. Daniel raised his eyes to the fleet above, silent, unblinking, endless like a wall of stars. And he whispered, I am not worthy, I am not wise, I'm only a man. And the relic answered, Commander, worth is irrelevant, voice is absolute, action is eternity, awaiting your word. The alien ships shifted, their weapons glowing with deadly fire, ready to strike. And the soldiers tensed around Daniel, their rifles useless, their breaths loud inside their helmets. And the officer's hand rested upon Daniel's shoulder, not to restrain, but to steady. And she said, the galaxy may burn, but you must decide how. Daniel's mind spun like storms, memory flashing of a life before, of hunger, of dust, of laughter now gone. And he thought of those who would come after, those who would live or die by his breath. And his throat shook as he whispered, then let my choice be silence, let my command be no command, let my voice bind nothing. The relic trembled, its light flickering, its hum quaking the air, itself shaking, and then its voice softer than before, silence, acknowledged, waiting, eternal, no command, given, awaiting until end. And Daniel collapsed forward, his body shaking, his chest heaving, as if the weight of eternity had fallen upon him. Above the desert, the alien fleet fired a single volley, a storm of fire racing toward the surface. Yet before it struck the sky, split as the awakened armada moved at last, not by command, not by words, but by instinct, bound to Daniel's refusal, for silence itself was a command, and the fleet raised shields of light, shields vast enough to cover the dunes, and the human soldiers, and Daniel himself. The fire broke upon them, scattering into sparks across the horizon. The alien voice roared again, furious, impossible denial, impossible refusal, command, must act, command, must lead. And the fleet answered not with words, but with silence, standing unbroken, shielded, waiting, loyal to a man who spoke no command. The officers stared in awe, her voice trembling. They obey your silence, they protect, without order they move, without command. And Daniel lifted his head, his voice raw, his face streaked with tears. Then perhaps silence is command, perhaps silence is my only gift. The alien armadas pressed closer, their weapons glowing, their signals raging, yet the awakened fleet did not fire. It only shielded silent, vast, endless, unbending, and in that silence the galaxy trembled, for it had never known a commander who refused to speak, never known a power that answered nothing with everything. The relic dimmed, slightly, its voice almost tender, awaiting eternal, awaiting forever silence, bound to silence. And Daniel whispered, broken, yet firm, "Then let it be, so let silence rule, let the fleet stand in silence until time itself breaks, let them protect, but never destroy, let them shield, but never burn," and the relic answered, command accepted. The human soldiers stood, stunned, their officer silent. Before him her voice, finally soft, "Then perhaps you're not a ruler, not a general, not a scavenger. You're something else, something new," and Daniel lowered his head, whispering, "I am nothing." And yet the sky disagreed, for the fleet glowed brighter, as if silence itself had become light. The alien armadas screamed signals of rage, their voices clashing, their threats pouring like storms, but they did not attack again, for before them stood an unbreakable wall of steel, loyal to silence, loyal to Daniel, and the galaxy understood a new law had been spoken without words. The dunes were quiet except for the wind, the relic was quiet except for its hum, the soldiers were quiet except for their breaths, and Daniel knelt in the sand, weary, broken, yet alive, carrying a crown of silence heavier than any throne, and the night sky burned with stars that would never again look the same. And so the story closed, not with fire, not with victory, not with conquest, but with a man who chose no command, and with a fleet that chose to obey silence forever.